My name is Captain Alexis Thorne. I've spent 12 years in the United States Army, the last 4 as part of the elite Delta Force. I've completed 47 classified missions across 3 continents. I've extracted hostages from terrorist compounds in the dead of night. I've neutralized high-value targets with a single shot from over 800 meters. I've been awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross. My psychological evaluations consistently rate me as exceptionally stable under extreme pressure. My marksmanship scores have broken base records 3 years running. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I've been called many things by my fellow operators: precise, unshakable, the soldier you want watching your 6 when everything goes sideways. My commander, Colonel Victoria Ice Hendricks, once told a Pentagon briefing that I was the most tactically sound operator she'd ever trained. In our world, trust isn't just important. It's the difference between coming home and coming home in a flag-draped box. But no one had ever prepared me for the day my own sister would try to use that trust to destroy everything I'd built. The day she sent me a gift that my Delta Force commander would later call the most sophisticated piece of evidence in a treason case I've ever seen. It started on what should have been one of the proudest days of my military career. I was stationed at Fort Braxton in North Carolina, home to the Army's most elite special operations units. The red brick buildings and perfectly manicured grounds had been my second home for the past 4 years. This particular morning, October 15th, was special. I was being promoted to Major, the youngest female soldier in Delta Force history to achieve that rank. The ceremony was scheduled for 1,400 hours in the main courtyard, with brass flying in from Washington, D.C. to witness what the Army Times would later call a historic moment for women in special operations. My parents had driven down from Vermont. My younger brother Tyler, a Navy SEAL, had managed to get leave from his deployment in the Pacific. Even my grandfather, a Korean War veteran who'd been skeptical about women in combat roles, had made the trip despite his failing health. But the person I was most excited to see was my sister, Vanessa. Vanessa and I had always been close, despite taking completely different paths in life. While I chose military service, she'd become a successful tech entrepreneur in Seattle. Her company, Phoenix Digital Solutions, specialized in cybersecurity for government contractors. She was brilliant with computers in ways that made my head spin. She could hack into systems that took me weeks to understand. Where I solved problems with precise action, she solved them with elegant code. The last time we'd talked 3 weeks earlier, she'd been bubbling with excitement about my promotion. "Alex, this is huge," she'd said over video call, her green eyes sparkling with pride. "The first female major in Delta Force? You're literally making history. I'm so proud of you." That conversation had meant everything to me. In a world where I was constantly proving myself against men who outweighed me by 50 pounds, having my sister's unwavering support was like having a piece of home in my back pocket. The morning of the ceremony, I was in my quarters at 0530 hours, pressing my dress uniform with military precision. Every ribbon, every crease, every button had to be perfect. This wasn't just about me. It represented every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough for special operations. At 8 a.m., packages started arriving at the base mail center. The usual military bureaucracy meant everything had to be inspected, cataloged, and cleared before reaching its destination. I wasn't expecting anything, so when Sergeant Rodriguez from Mail Services knocked on my door at 9:30 hours, I was surprised. "Package for you, ma'am," he said, holding a medium-sized box wrapped in brown shipping paper. The return address read, Phoenix Digital Solutions, Seattle, WA. Vanessa's company. My heart warmed. She'd sent something for my promotion ceremony. The handwriting on the label was definitely hers, that distinctive slanted script she'd had since high school. But something felt off. The package had arrived faster than normal mail from Seattle, and Vanessa usually called when she sent something. I shook off the unease. Maybe she'd wanted to surprise me. I set the package on my desk, deciding to open it after the ceremony. I had bigger things to focus on, like the speech I'd be giving to a crowd that included 2 generals and the Secretary of Defense. The ceremony itself was flawless. Standing at attention as Colonel Hendricks pinned the gold oak leaves to my collar, I felt a surge of pride that nearly brought tears to my eyes. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. History was being made. But as I scanned the crowd of proud faces during the reception that followed, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Vanessa wasn't there. She'd confirmed her attendance 2 weeks ago. She'd booked a flight, arranged time off work, even asked what she should wear to properly honor my badass sister. Her absence felt like a physical blow. I pulled out my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Alex. The ceremony was amazing, but I missed you. Hope everything's okay. Call me back." I tried twice more over the next hour. Nothing. It was 1900 hours when I finally returned to my quarters, emotionally drained but still riding the high of the day's achievement. The package sat exactly where I had left it, now seeming to loom larger in the small room.
I picked it up again, studying the label more carefully. The postmark was from 3 days ago. That would have been tight timing for Vanessa to get something appropriate shipped for today. And the more I looked at the handwriting, the more something nagged at me. It looked like hers, but there was something mechanical about it, too precise. I was reaching for a knife to cut the tape when my secure phone rang, the one reserved for official Delta Force business. "Major Thorne," I answered. "Raven, it's Ice." Colonel Hendricks's voice was crisp, professional, but I detected an undertone I'd never heard before. Concern. "I need you to report to my office immediately and bring that package you received today." My blood went cold. "Ma'am? Don't open it. Don't move it more than necessary. Just bring it here, now." The line went dead. I stared at the package in my hands, suddenly aware of how quiet my quarters had become. Outside, I could hear the distant sounds of evening chow and soldiers heading to their barracks. Normal sounds of military life, continuing as usual. But nothing felt normal anymore. Colonel Hendricks wouldn't have known about the package unless someone had told her. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting. I wrapped the package carefully in a towel and headed for the door, my mind racing through possibilities. None of them were good. As I walked across the base toward the command building, one terrible thought kept repeating in my head. If my Delta Force commander knew about a package I'd received from my sister, and she was treating it like a potential threat, then either someone was using Vanessa to get to me, or Vanessa was using me for something I couldn't yet comprehend. Either way, the sister I'd trusted with my life was about to become the center of the most dangerous investigation of my career.
"Alex, I've already cleared my calendar," she'd said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "I wouldn't miss this for anything. My sister? Making history? I'm going to be in the front row cheering so loud they'll hear me back at the Pentagon." She'd asked detailed questions about the ceremony. What time it started, what the dress code was, whether she needed any special clearance to get on base. I'd walked her through the entire process, even arranged for her name to be added to the VIP guest list. Her security clearance from her government contracting work made the approval process smooth. But now, as I shook hands with a seemingly endless line of well-wishers, her absence felt like a missing tooth, small but impossible to ignore. Colonel Hendricks appeared at my elbow during a brief lull in the receiving line. "Commander, outstanding ceremony. Your speech was particularly well received by the Secretary of Defense." "Thank you, ma'am. It means everything to have the support of the command structure." Her expression shifted slightly, and I caught something I'd learned to recognize during our years working together, a micro-expression that meant she had official business to discuss. "Walk with me for a moment." We stepped onto the club's patio, where the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds. "Your sister was expected today," Colonel Hendricks said without preamble. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Vanessa confirmed her attendance 2 weeks ago. I haven't been able to reach her since yesterday." I tried to keep the concern out of my voice, but I knew my commander could read me like an open book. "When did you last speak with her about the ceremony details?" The question struck me as oddly specific. 3 weeks ago. She called to confirm her travel arrangements and ask about base access procedures. Why? Colonel Hendricks was quiet for a moment, her eyes scanning the horizon in that way that meant she was processing multiple streams of information simultaneously. Has she ever asked you about your work? Specific operational details, security protocols, anything beyond general military life? No, ma'am. Vanessa knows better than that. She holds a secret clearance for her own work with government contractors. She understands operational security. That was true. Vanessa's company, Phoenix Digital Solutions, had contracts with the Department of Defense for cybersecurity infrastructure. She'd been through background investigations that were almost as thorough as my own. The idea that she would compromise operational security was absurd. But her company specializes in what kind of cybersecurity? Government systems, network protection, threat assessment, digital forensics. She's worked on some pretty high-level projects. Pentagon firewall upgrades, secure communication protocols for special operations units. As I said the words, something cold settled in my stomach. Colonel Hendricks' questions weren't random conversation. They were an interrogation, conducted with the subtle precision that made her one of the most effective commanders in special operations. Major Thorne, I need you to think carefully. In your recent conversations with your sister, did she ever ask you about your current assignment, your security clearances, access protocols for the space? I was about to say no when a memory surfaced. Last month, during one of our regular video calls, Vanessa had mentioned something about upgrading security systems for a major East Coast military installation. She'd asked if I thought Fort Braxton might be interested in her company's services. At the time, it had seemed like innocent conversation, a sister asking for advice about a potential business opportunity. But now, filtered through Colonel Hendricks' questions, it felt different. She mentioned her company might bid on contracts for bases like Braxton, I said slowly, but that seemed like normal business development conversation. Colonel Hendricks nodded, but her expression remained unreadable. Major, I need you to report to my office at 1900 hours. There are some things we need to discuss about your family's security clearances. She turned to walk back inside, then paused. And, Major, don't contact your sister until after our meeting. As I watched my commander disappear back into the reception, the perfect day suddenly felt fragile, like a house of cards in a strong wind. The laughter and congratulations from inside the officers' club seemed to be coming from another world. Something was wrong. Something involving Vanessa and her absence from the most important day of my career. But what scared me most wasn't what I didn't know about my sister's activities. It was the growing suspicion that maybe I didn't know my sister at all. At exactly 1900 hours, I stood outside Colonel Hendricks' office, the mysterious package tucked securely under my arm. The command building felt different in the evening hours, more quiet, more ominous. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows down the long corridor lined with framed photos of Delta Force operations dating back to the unit's inception. I knocked twice on the heavy oak door marked Colonel V. Hendricks, Commanding Officer. Enter. Colonel Hendricks sat behind her desk, but she wasn't alone. Two people I didn't recognize occupied the chairs facing her, a woman in a dark business suit and a man whose bearing screamed federal agent even in civilian clothes. Their presence immediately shifted the atmosphere from military briefing to something far more serious. Major Thorne, please have a seat. Colonel Hendricks gestured to an empty chair. This is Agent Rebecca Morrison from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division and Agent David Park from the Defense Security Service. My blood went cold. Counterintelligence. This wasn't about a missed family gathering anymore. Agent Morrison leaned forward, her gray eyes sharp and calculating. Major Thorne, we understand you received a package today from Phoenix Digital Solutions in Seattle. May we examine it? I placed the wrapped package on the desk, noting how all three sets of eyes focused on it with laser intensity. I haven't opened it yet. Colonel Hendricks instructed me to bring it here first.
Agent Park produced a small device that looked like a sophisticated metal detector and began scanning the package without touching it. After several passes, he nodded to his partner. No electronic signatures, no obvious triggers. Appears to be safe for manual examination. Major,
Agent Morrison said, pulling on latex gloves. "We're going to open this package now. I need you to observe everything we do and tell us if anything seems inconsistent with what you would expect from your sister." Using a precision knife, she carefully cut through the tape and unfolded the brown shipping paper. Inside was a white gift box, the kind you might get from an upscale department store. The lid lifted easily, revealing layers of tissue paper. Nestled inside was a beautiful silver picture frame, clearly expensive, with an engraved plaque that read, "To Major Alexis Thorne, making history. Love, Vanessa." But it was what was in the frame that made my stomach drop. It was a photograph of me in full combat gear taken during a classified operation in Eastern Europe 6 months ago. I was standing next to a building that shouldn't exist in any official records, holding equipment that was never supposed to be photographed. The image was crystal clear, professionally shot, and absolutely classified at the highest levels. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. Agent Morrison carefully lifted the frame, examining it from all angles. "Major, have you ever seen this photograph before?" "No, ma'am. This operation was classified top secret. No official photos were taken, and personal cameras weren't allowed anywhere near the operational area." Agent Park was already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. I caught fragments. "Immediate security review. Photographic evidence of classified operations. Need a full digital forensics team." Colonel Hendricks' voice was steel. "Major, I need you to think very carefully. How could your sister have obtained this photograph?" My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. She couldn't have. There's no way. Unless... I stopped, a terrible thought forming. "Unless what, Major?" "Unless someone with access to classified mission files provided it to her? But that would require clearance levels that she doesn't have and access to operational archives that are restricted to maybe 20 people in the entire government." Agent Morrison set down the frame and reached for her briefcase. "Major Thorne, I'm going to show you something that I think will help explain what we're dealing with here." She produced a tablet and swiped to a series of photographs. These were taken by our surveillance team at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport 3 days ago. The first photo showed Vanessa at an airport coffee shop, sitting across from a man I didn't recognize. He was middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of forgettable face that intelligence operatives cultivated. They were clearly in deep conversation, leaning close over their cups. The second photo showed Vanessa handing him an envelope. The third showed him handing her a small package, roughly the same size as the one that had contained the photograph. "Who is he?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "His name is Viktor Petrov. He's a known intelligence operative working for the Russian SVR. He's been on our watch list for 3 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. My sister, my brilliant, successful, patriotic sister, had been photographed conducting what appeared to be an intelligence handoff with a Russian spy. "That's impossible," I said automatically. "Vanessa would never. She holds a security clearance. She's been vetted. She loves this country." Agent Morrison's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Major, we've been monitoring Petrov's activities for months. This meeting wasn't accidental. Your sister initiated contact with him through encrypted channels 2 weeks ago." Colonel Hendricks spoke up. "Major, we need to consider the possibility that your sister has been compromised. Either she's being coerced or she's working for them voluntarily," I finished, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Agent Park ended his phone call and rejoined the conversation. "The digital forensic team is en route. They'll want to examine every component of this frame, the photo, the glass, the backing, even the engraving tools used. But Major, I need to ask you some difficult questions about your sister's behavior over the past few months." For the next hour, they grilled me about every conversation I had had with Vanessa since Christmas. Every phone call, every text message, every casual question about my work or my assignments. Under their methodical questioning, a pattern began to emerge that made my skin crawl. Vanessa's casual inquiries about base security, her questions about which operations I was involved in, her sudden interest in my promotion ceremony, and the high-ranking officials who would be attending. her company's aggressive pursuit of military contracts, specifically at installations where I was stationed. She's been mapping your career, Agent Morrison said bluntly. Every question she asked you was designed to build a profile of your access, your relationships, and your operational value. The worst part was realizing how willing I had been to answer. Vanessa was my sister. I trusted her completely. When she asked about my work, I'd been proud to share the non-classified details. When she expressed interest in military culture, I'd been happy to educate her. I'd been the perfect target. Colonel Hendricks stood up, her face grim. Major, I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full security review. This isn't disciplinary. You're the victim here. But we need to assess what information may have been compromised through your contact with your sister. Agent Morrison added, we're also going to need you to help us understand the full scope of what she might know. Every detail you can remember about your conversations with her could be crucial to national security.
As if this day couldn't get any worse, Agent Park's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. We have a problem. Our surveillance team in Seattle just reported that Vanessa Thorne failed to return to her apartment after work today. Her car is still in her office parking garage, but she's nowhere to be found. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of evening training exercises outside. My sister wasn't just a potential security threat anymore. She was a missing person who had classified information about Delta Force operations and had been photographed meeting with Russian intelligence. Colonel Hendricks walked to the window, staring out at the base where I'd built my entire adult life. Major, I need you to prepare for the possibility that everything you thought you knew about your sister was carefully constructed fiction. The woman who sent you that photograph isn't the woman who cheered for you at your high school graduation or cried when you deployed to Afghanistan. I stared at the framed photograph on the desk, my own face looking back at me from a mission that was supposed to be invisible to the world. The silver frame caught the overhead lights, winking like a malicious eye. She knew I wouldn't open it at the ceremony, I said quietly. She knew I'd wait until I was alone, maybe even take it back to my quarters where I could appreciate it privately. If you hadn't called me here, you would have discovered classified material in your possession, with no witnesses and no way to prove how it got there, Agent Morrison finished. A perfect setup for a potential espionage charge. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just betrayal, it was sabotage. My own sister had tried to frame me for treason. The emergency briefing room in the Pentagon's basement felt like a bunker designed to contain the worst-case scenarios of American national security. I'd been here only twice before in my career, both times for mission debriefs that couldn't wait for normal channels. Now I sat at the polished mahogany table, still wearing my dress uniform from yesterday's ceremony, watching as some of the most powerful people in the intelligence community filed in around me. It had been 16 hours since the package revelation. 16 hours since my world had turned upside down. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and had spent the red-eye flight from Fort Braxton to Andrews Air Force Base staring out the window, trying to reconcile the sister I loved with the woman who had apparently been selling secrets to Russian intelligence. Admiral Sarah Shark Chen, director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, took her seat at the head of the table. Her reputation preceded her. 30 years of military intelligence, architect of some of the most successful counterintelligence operations in recent history. When she looked at you, it felt like she could see through whatever facade you were trying to maintain. Major Thorne, she said without preamble, before we begin, I want you to understand that nothing discussed in this room leaves this room. You're here because you're the victim of what appears to be a sophisticated intelligence operation, but you're also our best source of information about the subject. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. Agent Morrison from the FBI sat to my right, along with a man she'd introduced as Deputy Director James Walsh from the CIA's Counterintelligence Center. Across from me sat Colonel Hendricks, and a woman's nameplate simply read, Dr. K. Foster, NSA. The weight of their combined attention was crushing. Dr. Foster opened a secured laptop and turned it toward me. Major, what I'm about to show you comes from NSA's Signals Intelligence Collection. These are encrypted communications we intercepted over the past 6 months between your sister and various foreign contacts. The screen displayed a series of chat logs with timestamps and digital signatures that looked legitimate. But what made my blood run cold was seeing Vanessa's handle, Phoenix Rising, in conversation with someone identified as Red Square. Red Square. Phoenix. Need confirmation on Braxton facility layout, specifically access points to classified briefing areas. Phoenix Rising. Working on it. My source has limited access but high trust factor. We'll have architectural details within 2 weeks. Excellent. Payment will be transferred through usual channels. Remember, timing is critical for the ceremony infiltration. Phoenix Rising. Understood. Target will be isolated and vulnerable during the event. Perfect opportunity for evidence placement. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling slightly. Target? She was talking about me like I was an enemy combatant. There's more, Dr. Foster said, scrolling down to another exchange dated just 1 week ago. Red Square. Phoenix, has your source confirmed guest list for promotion ceremony? Phoenix Rising. Confirmed. Secretary of Defense, 2 generals, and approximately 200 military personnel. Security will be focused on external threats, not internal package delivery. Red Square. Perfect. Frame will contain compromising material as discussed. Your source will be implicated in espionage charges within 48 hours of discovery. Phoenix Rising. And my extraction? Red Square. Helicopter pickup from coordinates provided. You'll be in international waters before they realize you've disappeared. Admiral Chen leaned forward. Major, according to our analysis, this operation was designed to accomplish 2 objectives. First, to discredit you and potentially compromise Delta Force security protocols, and second, to extract your sister to Russia, where she could continue providing intelligence services. The room felt like it was spinning. Vanessa hadn't just betrayed me, she'd planned to destroy my life and then disappear forever. Deputy Director Walsh spoke for the first time. Major, we need to understand how deeply your sister penetrated your operational security. These communications suggest she had detailed knowledge of base layouts, security protocols, and upcoming classified operations. Knowledge that could only have come from someone with your level of access.
I never told her anything classified, I said, hearing the defensive edge in my own voice. Every conversation we had stayed well within OPSEC guidelines. Agent Morrison pulled out a thick folder. Major, we've analyzed your phone records, email logs, and even your social media activity over the past year. While you're correct that you never directly shared classified information, the pattern of your sister's questions created a comprehensive intelligence picture. She spread out a series of printed documents across the table. Phone call transcripts, email exchanges, even text message threads that I'd thought were innocent family communication. Look at this conversation from March. Agent Morrison pointed to a highlighted section. Your sister asked about your workout schedule, which facilities you used, and what time you typically went to the gym. Innocent family conversation, right? I nodded, remembering the call. Vanessa had been talking about joining a gym in Seattle and wanted advice on establishing a routine. But when we cross-referenced this with her other questions about base layout, building access, and daily schedules, she was actually mapping your patterns. She knew exactly where you'd be and when, making it easier to predict when your quarters would be empty or when you'd be isolated from potential witnesses. Dr. Foster highlighted another exchange. Here, she asked about your upcoming deployment schedule and which countries you might be visiting. You gave her general information about increased training rotations in Eastern Europe. That's not classified information, I protested. Training schedules are discussed openly among families. You're right, Admiral Chen said. But combined with other intelligence sources, that information helped foreign agents predict where American Special Operations Forces would be operating. 3 of our missions in that region had to be scrubbed because enemy forces were waiting for us. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Missions had been compromised. American lives had been put at risk because I'd trusted my sister with casual conversation about my job? Colonel Hendricks spoke up for the first time since we'd entered the room. Major, there's something else. We've discovered that Phoenix Digital Solutions has been systematically underbidding on cybersecurity contracts for military installations where you've been stationed. Over the past 4 years, they've won contracts at 3 different bases where you've served. That's impossible. Vanessa never mentioned working on projects at my bases.
Deputy Director Walsh opened another file. According to these financial records, Phoenix Digital Solutions received unusually large payments from shell companies with ties to Russian intelligence services. The timing of these payments corresponds exactly with your sister's communication intercepts. Agent Morrison leaned back in her chair. Major, your sister wasn't just gathering intelligence from your conversations. She was using her cybersecurity access to install backdoors in military networks. Every base where she's worked is now considered compromised. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about my sister selling secrets. She'd been running a multi-year operation that had compromised American military cybersecurity at the highest levels. Admiral Chen stood up, her expression grim. Major Thorne, I'm going to be direct with you. This is one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations we've seen in decades. Your sister didn't just happen to fall into this. She was likely recruited years ago, possibly even before you joined Delta Force. The thought that had been lurking in the back of my mind finally surfaced. You think she targeted me specifically? We think it's possible that your relationship with your sister was cultivated from the beginning. Her choice to start a cybersecurity company, her focus on government contracts, even her decision to maintain close contact with you throughout your military career, all of it could have been orchestrated. Dr. Foster closed her laptop and looked directly at me. Major, we need your help to find your sister and roll up this network before more damage is done. But I need you to understand that the woman you're looking for may not be the sister you remember. She may never have been that person. Colonel Hendricks reached across the table and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Alexis, I know this is overwhelming, but right now, you're our best hope of stopping a major intelligence operation that threatens national security. Are you ready to help us bring her in? I looked around the table at faces that were watching me with a mixture of sympathy and expectation. These people needed me to be strong, to be the soldier they'd trained me to be. But all I could think about was Christmas morning 3 years ago, when Vanessa had surprised me with leave time, and we'd spent the day cooking together in my parents' kitchen, laughing until our sides hurt. Had that been real? Had any of it been real? What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. We need you to help us catch a ghost. And Major, this time, the mission is personal. The safe house in Quantico looked like any other suburban home from the outside. Beige siding, manicured lawn, white picket fence. But the moment you stepped inside, you could feel the difference. Reinforced walls, electronic surveillance equipment humming quietly in every room, and windows that didn't quite look like windows. This was where the FBI brought people who needed to disappear while still being closely monitored. I'd been here for 3 days, working around the clock with a team of analysts to reconstruct every interaction I'd ever had with Vanessa. My laptop was connected to secure servers that contained more processing power than most small countries possessed. Every phone call, every email, every casual conversation was being dissected by algorithms designed to find patterns that human minds might miss. Agent Morrison sat across from me at the dining room table that had been converted into a command center. Laptops, secure phones, and stacks of classified documents covered every surface. She'd barely left my side since we'd arrived, walking me through years of memories with the methodical precision of a surgeon. Tell me about Thanksgiving 2019, she said, pulling up a file on her screen. You were stationed at Fort Campbell, and Vanessa flew in from Seattle to spend the holiday with your family. I closed my eyes, trying to remember details that had seemed insignificant at the time. She arrived 2 days early. Said she wanted to spend extra time with family, maybe do some sightseeing around Kentucky. Did she rent a car? No, she used my parents' car. Said she wanted to drive around the countryside, take some photos for her company's website. Something about showcasing American landscapes for international clients. Agent Morrison made a note. According to our investigation, Fort Campbell's perimeter was photographed extensively that weekend. Professional-grade surveillance photos that showed guard posts, fence lines, and vehicle checkpoints. We found them on a secure server linked to Phoenix Digital Solutions. The innocent family memories kept crumbling under scrutiny. What I'd remembered as my sister's artistic interest in rural America had actually been reconnaissance for a foreign intelligence service. "There's something else about that weekend," Agent Morrison continued, her voice gentler now. "Your parents mentioned that Vanessa spent a lot of time asking about your childhood, your friends, your early military training. Did that seem unusual?" I thought back to those long conversations in my parents' kitchen. Vanessa had been unusually curious about my past, asking questions about things we'd never discussed before. She said she was thinking about writing a blog post about military families, how service members are shaped by their backgrounds. I thought it was sweet that she wanted to understand my world better. What specifically did she ask about? Everything. My high school teachers, my reasons for joining the Army, which recruiters I'd worked with, what had motivated me to try for special operations. I paused, remembering something that had struck me as odd. She recorded some of our conversations on her phone, said she wanted to make sure she quoted me accurately. Agent Morrison's expression darkened. Those recordings were probably used to build a psychological profile. Foreign intelligence agencies use that kind of information to predict behavior, identify weaknesses, and develop long-term manipulation strategies. She pulled up another file, this one containing financial records. "Major, during that same visit, your sister made several purchases at electronic stores near Fort Campbell. High-end recording equipment, wireless transmission devices, and something called a digital spectrum analyzer." What does that do? "It's used to intercept wireless communications, radio frequencies, cell phone signals, even encrypted military communications if you know what you're looking for." The implications were staggering. While I'd been showing my sister around my hometown, proud to share my military life with her, she'd been conducting an intelligence operation against the base where I worked. Dr. Foster entered the room carrying a secure tablet and a cup of coffee that probably gone cold hours ago. She'd been working in the basement since we'd arrived, coordinating with NSA teams who were tracing the digital breadcrumbs of Vanessa's activities. "Major, we've made a breakthrough," she said, setting the tablet on the table. "We've been analyzing the metadata from your sister's communications, and we found something interesting. The encryption keys she was using are extremely sophisticated, military-grade algorithms that aren't available to civilian contractors." What does that mean? "It means your sister had help. Someone with access to NSA-level encryption technology was supporting her operation." Agent Morrison pulled up another file, this one containing financial records. "Major, during that same visit, your sister made several purchases at electronics stores near Fort Campbell, high-end recording equipment, wireless transmission devices, and something called a digital spectrum analyzer." What does that do? "It's used to intercept wireless communications, radio frequencies, cell phone signals, even encrypted military communications, if you know what you're looking for." The implications were staggering. While I'd been showing my sister around my hometown, proud to share my military life with her, she'd been conducting an intelligence operation against the base where I worked. Dr. Foster entered the room carrying a secure tablet and a cup of coffee that probably gone cold hours ago. She'd been working in the basement since we'd arrived, coordinating with NSA teams who were tracing the digital breadcrumbs of Vanessa's activities. "Major, we've made a breakthrough," she said, setting the tablet on the table. "We've been analyzing the metadata from your sister's communications, and we found something interesting. The encryption keys she was using are extremely sophisticated, military-grade algorithms that aren't available to civilian contractors." What does that mean? "It means your sister had help. Someone with access to NSA-level encryption technology was supporting her operation." Agent Morrison leaned forward. "Major, we need to consider the possibility that your sister wasn't working alone. This level of sophistication suggests a larger network, possibly including someone in our own intelligence community." The tablet screen showed a complex network diagram that looked like a spiderweb of connections. Vanessa's name was at the center, but lines extended out to dozens of other nodes, some labeled with names I didn't recognize, others marked simply as unknown contact or encrypted source. Dr. Foster pointed to one particular connection that pulsed red on the screen. This is the most concerning development. We've identified communications between your sister and someone using the codename Raven's Shadow. Based on the timing and content of these messages, Raven's Shadow appears to have detailed knowledge of your operational schedule. My call sign was Raven. The coincidence sent chills down my spine. The last communication we intercepted was sent 4 hours before your promotion ceremony. Raven scheduled that provided your sister with the exact timing of when you would return to your quarters, when you would be alone, and when security would be focused elsewhere. Agent Morrison pulled up the actual message on her laptop. Major, this is going to be difficult to read, but you need to see it. The text appeared on screen in stark black letters. Raven returns to nest at 1830 hours, package delivery confirmed at 1900 hours. Target will be isolated for approximately 2 hours before evening briefings. Security detail rotates at 2000 hours. Extraction window opens at 2030 hours. Phoenix confirms understanding and preparation complete. I stared at the message, my hands clenching into fists. Someone with intimate knowledge of my daily routine, my security protocols, and my personal habits had been feeding information to my sister. Someone I worked with, someone I trusted, someone who had access to classified scheduling information. Who has access to that level of detail about my movements? I asked. Agent Morrison exchanged a look with Dr. Foster. Major, that's the question that's going to determine the scope of this investigation. We're looking at anyone with security clearance who had access to your operational schedule, your command structure, your team members, administrative staff, even other special operation personnel who might have overheard conversations.
The paranoia was setting in. How many people in my professional life had I trusted with casual information about my schedule, my habits, my relationships? How many of my colleagues might have been feeding intelligence to a foreign service? Dr. Foster's secure phone buzzed, and she answered it immediately. After a brief, coded conversation, she hung up and turned to us with an expression that mixed excitement with concern. "We've got a lead," she said. "NSA's Signals Intelligence Division has been monitoring Russian diplomatic communications, and they've intercepted messages about a high-value asset extraction scheduled for tonight. The asset is described as Phoenix, and the extraction point is a private airfield in rural Virginia." Agent Morrison was already reaching for her secure radio. "How far from here?" 2 hours by helicopter. But there's a complication. The communications suggest that Phoenix isn't traveling alone. They're extracting someone else, someone described as the failsafe. I felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. The mole. Whoever's been feeding information to Vanessa is going with her. Dr. Foster nodded grimly. "And if they reach that extraction point, we'll lose our only chance to identify the insider who's been compromising Delta Force operations." Agent Morrison stood up, her professional mask slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "Major, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Is there anyone in your unit, anyone at all, who has shown unusual interest in your family relationships or your sister's activities?" I closed my eyes, thinking through months of casual conversations, briefings, and off-duty interactions. Then a memory surfaced that made my blood run cold. 3 weeks ago, during a post-mission debrief, someone had asked me about my promotion ceremony. Someone had wanted to know about the guest list, about security arrangements, about which family members would be attending. Someone I'd never suspected. Someone whose betrayal would hurt almost as much as my sister's. The name that came out of my mouth felt like swallowing broken glass. Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane. Agent Morrison's pen stopped moving across her notepad. Dr. Foster looked up from her tablet with an expression that I couldn't quite read. The silence in the safe house stretched until it felt suffocating. "Major," Agent Morrison said carefully, "are you certain?" I was replaying the conversation in my mind, seeing it now through the lens of betrayal instead of camaraderie. 3 weeks ago, in the briefing room after returning from a routine training exercise in Poland, Kane had been cleaning his weapon, the familiar ritual that followed every mission, when he'd started asking questions.
He wanted to know about the promotion ceremony, I said, my voice sounding hollow in a sterile room. Asked who was coming, what the security arrangements would be, whether there would be any foreign dignitaries present. I thought he was just making conversation. Dr. Foster was already typing rapidly on her secure laptop. Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane, assigned to your unit for how long? 2 years. He transferred in from the 75th Ranger Regiment after his previous team leader was killed in Syria. It was exemplary service record, clean background check, security clearance, updated annually. The words came out automatically, but even as I said them, I was remembering other details that hadn't seemed important before. Kane's unusual interest in my personal life, his questions about my family's military background, the way he'd volunteered for administrative duties that gave him access to operational schedules and personnel files. Agent Morrison was speaking into her secure radio. I need a full background workup on Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane, service number... She looked at me expectantly. I rattled off Kane's service number from memory, along with his clearance levels and unit assignment history. In special operations, you memorized your teammates' information because their lives depended on your ability to access help when everything went wrong. Major, Dr. Foster said, turning her laptop screen towards me, we're going to show you something that might be difficult to process. These are financial records we've been analyzing for the past 72 hours. The screen displayed a series of bank transactions, wire transfers, and investment account activities. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the money, it was seeing Kane's name linked to the same shell companies that had been paying Phoenix Digital Solutions. Sergeant Kane has received approximately $300,000 over the past 18 months. The payments were routed through the same offshore accounts that funded your sister's operation. But here's what's really interesting. The payments began exactly 2 weeks after he was assigned to your unit. The implication was clear. Kane hadn't just been randomly recruited after joining my team. He'd been placed there specifically to monitor me, to gather intelligence about my activities and relationships. Agent Morrison ended her radio conversation and turned back to us. Major, we've just confirmed that Sergeant Kane requested leave starting yesterday. A 72-hour pass that he claimed was for a family emergency in West Virginia. But according to our surveillance, he never traveled to West Virginia. Where did he go? We're tracking his vehicle now. Last known location was heading south on I-95 toward the extraction coordinates our NSA intercepts identified. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Kane hadn't just been feeding information to my sister, he was her backup plan. If the package frame-up had failed, if I'd somehow avoided the espionage charges, Kane would have been there to provide additional evidence or testimony to ensure my downfall. Dr. Foster pulled up another file. Major, there's something else. We've analyzed the metadata from Kane's military communications, and we found evidence that he's been photographing classified documents for months. Mission plans, personnel files, operational schedules, everything a foreign intelligence service would need to track and potentially eliminate high-value American assets. The betrayal felt personal in a way that even my sister's deception hadn't. Vanessa was family, and family relationships were complicated by love and history and shared experiences. But Kane was my brother in arms. In Delta Force, you trusted your teammates with your life on a daily basis. That trust was sacred, forged in combat and tested under fire. How long do we have before the extraction? I asked. Agent Morrison checked her watch. Based on the intercepted communications, approximately 4 hours. But Major, there's something you need to understand. This isn't just about capturing 2 traitors. Our intelligence suggests that Kane has been documenting Delta Force operational procedures, training methods, and tactical innovations. If that information reaches Russia, they'll be able to counter our methods, I finished. Every advantage we've developed over the past decade becomes useless. Dr. Foster nodded grimly. And not just useless, dangerous. They'll know how we operate, how we think, how we approach problems. American special operations personnel around the world would be compromised. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about my sister's personal vendetta or Kane's financial motivation. This was about dismantling the operational effectiveness of America's most elite military units.
Agent Morrison's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, and her expression shifted to something I recognized from my own military experience, the look of someone who just received very bad news. "What is it?" I asked. "We've lost Kane's vehicle signal. He's either switched cars or he's reached a location with sophisticated electronic countermeasures. But our satellites have identified increased activity at the extraction site. Multiple vehicles, what appears to be temporary communication equipment, and..." She paused. "A helicopter on standby." Dr. Foster was already pulling up satellite imagery on her laptop. The extraction site was a small private airfield surrounded by dense forest, the kind of place that could be accessed by ground or air without attracting attention from local authorities. "Major," Agent Morrison said, "we're assembling a joint task force to intercept this extraction. FBI, CIA, and military personnel. But we need someone who knows Kane personally, who understands his training and his likely tactical responses." The request hung in the air between us. They wanted me to help capture the man who'd been sitting next to me in briefings, who'd watched my back during training exercises, who'd shared meals and conversations, and the peculiar intimacy of soldiers who trusted each other with their lives. "You want me to participate in the operation," I said. "We want you to lead the team that takes Kane down," Agent Morrison replied. "You know him better than anyone. You know how he thinks, how he moves, what his strengths and weaknesses are in combat situations." I thought about all the times Kane had demonstrated his tactical skills during training, his expertise with weapons systems, his ability to adapt quickly to changing situations, his uncanny talent for predicting enemy movements. All of those skills would now be turned against American forces. "There's one more thing," Dr. Foster said quietly. "Our intercept suggests that this extraction is just the beginning. Kane and your sister have been documenting other high-value targets within the special operations community. If they successfully reach Russia, they'll begin identifying and compromising other soldiers, other units, other operations." The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a familiar piece of equipment. This wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore. This was about protecting every soldier who wore the American flag, every operator who trusted their teammates, every mission that depended on operational security. Agent Morrison stood up, already reaching for her tactical gear. "Major, we have a helicopter standing by. If we leave now, we can reach the extraction site before they complete their escape." I looked around the safe house that had been my temporary prison, at the evidence of betrayal scattered across every surface, at the faces of people who are trusting me to help them stop a catastrophic intelligence loss. Let's go get them. Because some betrayals are too dangerous to forgive, and some secrets are too important to let walk away. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through Virginia's twilight sky like a blade through silk, its rotors beating a rhythm that matched my accelerated heartbeat. Below us, the Shenandoah Valley stretched out in patches of amber farmland and dark forest, peaceful and pastoral, completely at odds with the military operation unfolding above it. I sat strapped into the tactical seat, wearing full combat gear for the first time in 4 days. The familiar weight of my M4 carbine, the ceramic plates of my body armor, the night vision goggles mounted on my helmet, all of it felt like coming home after being lost in a foreign country. This was my world. This was where I made sense. Across from me sat Captain Luis "Ghost" Mendoza, the FBI's hostage rescue team leader who'd been assigned as my operational partner. To my left was Agent Sarah Kim from the CIA's Special Activities Division, a woman whose compact frame belied the fact that she'd been conducting paramilitary operations in hostile territories for the past 8 years. The rest of the team consisted of operators I'd never worked with before, but whose reputations preceded them, the kind of people who got called when conventional law enforcement wasn't enough. "Major," Captain Mendoza said through the aircraft's intercom system, "we've got updated intelligence from the surveillance drone." He handed me a tablet displaying real-time aerial footage of the extraction site. Oakwood Regional Airport was a small civilian facility that primarily served corporate jets and private aircraft. 2 runways, a modest terminal building, and several hangars scattered across 50 acres of cleared land surrounded by dense forest. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the layout. It was the activity. "Count 3 vehicles in the parking area," Agent Kim observed, pointing at the screen. 2 black SUVs and what appears to be a modified surveillance van. Professional setup. I studied the footage more carefully. The vehicles were positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire around the main terminal building.
Someone with military training had selected those positions, someone who understood defensive tactics and extraction security. "There," I said, zooming in on a figure moving between the vehicles. Even from the drone's altitude, I could recognize the purposeful stride, the way he carried his rifle, the tactical positioning that had been drilled into both of us during years of training together. That's Kane. Captain Mendoza leaned over to look at the screen. "You're certain?" "I've watched him move for 2 years. That's definitely him." I felt a familiar coldness settling over me, the emotional detachment that came before going into combat. Personal feelings were a liability in tactical situations. Kane wasn't my former teammate anymore. He was a hostile target who needed to be neutralized. The pilot's voice crackled through our headsets. 5 minutes to insertion point. Agent Kim was coordinating with other elements of the operation through her secure radio. Overwatch teams are in position on the ridgelines. Ground units have established a perimeter 2 kilometers out. We have the site contained, but Major, we need to move fast. Our signals intelligence suggests they're expecting extraction within the next 90 minutes. I nodded, running through the tactical plan we developed during the flight. The extraction site had several vulnerabilities that we could exploit. The open ground around the runways provided excellent fields of fire for our snipers. The limited access roads meant we could control ingress and egress. And most importantly, Kane and my sister were expecting extraction, not capture. They'd be focused on watching the sky for their ride home, not the ground for pursuit. "Major," Captain Mendoza said, "I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. When we make contact with Sergeant Kane, are you going to be able to treat him like any other hostile target?" The question was fair. In military operations, personal relationships could get people killed if they interfered with tactical decision-making. But I'd been thinking about this question since we'd lifted off from Quantico. "Captain, Sergeant Kane betrayed every soldier who ever trusted him. He sold out operations that put American lives at risk. He's been feeding intelligence to a foreign service that wants to kill people I've served with." I met his eyes steadily. "When we go in there, I'm not seeing a former teammate. I'm seeing a target that needs to be eliminated before he does more damage." Agent Kim finished her radio conversation and turned back to us. "We've got a complication. Thermal imaging shows at least 6 people inside the terminal building, but we've only identified Kane and your sister from the external surveillance. That means they have backup we weren't expecting." The pilots announced our approach to the insertion point, and I could feel the helicopter beginning its descent toward a clearing about 2 kilometers from the airport. Through the open door, I could see the other aircraft in our formation, 2 more Blackhawks carrying additional tactical teams, and a pair of Apache attack helicopters providing air support. "Could be Russian extraction specialists?" Captain Mendoza suggested. "Spetsnaz operators brought in to provide security for high-value assets? Or it could be more moles," I said grimly. "Kane might not be the only insider they've recruited." Agent Kim checked her weapon and adjusted her night vision equipment. "Either way, we're going in hard and fast. No negotiations, no attempts at peaceful surrender. These people have been compromising American national security for months. We take them down, we recover whatever intelligence they're carrying, and we make sure none of them ever have the opportunity to betray their country again." The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and autumn leaves. As we fast-roped to the ground, I could hear the distant sound of the other teams deploying around the perimeter. Within minutes, we'd have the entire area locked down tighter than a maximum security prison. But as we moved through the forest toward the airport, something was nagging at me. The operational setup was too clean, too professional. Kane was good, but he wasn't experienced enough to plan an extraction this sophisticated. My sister was brilliant with computers, but she had no tactical training. Which meant someone else was running this operation. Someone with the kind of experience that came from years of special operations work. Captain Mendoza's voice came through my earpiece. "Overwatch reports movement in the terminal building. Looks like they're preparing to move to the runway." "How long until the extraction aircraft arrives?" I asked. Agent Kim checked her watch. "Based on intercepted communications, approximately 30 minutes. 30 minutes to cover 2 kilometers of forest, assault a defended position, and capture multiple high-value targets without letting any of them escape or destroy the intelligence they're carrying. In Delta Force, we called that a Standard Tuesday. But as we moved closer to the airport, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something more complicated than a simple extraction interdiction. The professional setup, the unexpected backup, the sophisticated operational security, it all suggested that this wasn't just about Kane and my sister anymore. This felt like the kind of operation that would end up classified for the next 50 years, assuming any of us survived to write the after-action report. "Ghost, this is Raven," I said into my radio, using the tactical call signs we'd established for the operation. "I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The setup is too professional for the players we're tracking." "Copy that, Raven. What are you thinking?" I paused at the edge of the tree line, studying the airport through my night vision scope. The terminal building was lit up like a Christmas tree, completely contrary to standard operational security for a clandestine extraction. "I think we're not just interdicting an extraction, I think we're walking into a trap."
The terminal building's glass doors exploded inward as our breaching charges detonated simultaneously at 3 entry points. Through my night vision goggles, the world turned into a green-tinted chaos of smoke, debris, and moving figures as our assault teams flooded into the building from multiple directions. "Federal agents! Nobody move! Hands where we can see them!" The tactical commands echoed through the terminal's main hall, but instead of the expected compliance or panicked resistance, we were met with something that made my blood freeze. Laughter. Not the hysterical laughter of someone breaking under pressure, but the cold, calculated amusement of someone who had been expecting us all along. "Hello, Alexis." The voice came from the elevated observation deck overlooking the main terminal. I swung my rifle toward the sound, my infrared laser painting a red dot on the figure standing calmly behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was Vanessa. But this wasn't the sister I remembered. Gone was the casual tech entrepreneur and designer jeans and oversized sweaters. The woman looking down at me wore tactical black clothing, a ballistic vest, and carried herself with the confident posture of someone comfortable with violence. Her hair was pulled back severely, and even from this distance, I could see that her expression held none of the warmth I'd associated with my little sister for 28 years. "Vanessa Thorne, you're under arrest for espionage, conspiracy against the United States, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act," Agent Kim called out through her radio amplifier. "Come down here with your hands visible." The laughter came again, echoing off the terminal's high ceilings. "Agent Kim, isn't it? Sarah Kim, CIA Special Activities Division, formerly attached to Task Force Orange in Afghanistan. Your operational record makes for fascinating reading." My blood went cold. Vanessa shouldn't have known Agent Kim's identity, much less her classified assignment history, which meant the intelligence leak was broader and deeper than we realized. "Raven, we've got a problem," Captain Mendoza's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Thermal imaging shows multiple heat signatures moving through the maintenance tunnels beneath the building. We're not dealing with 6 targets, we're looking at closer to 15. Through the smoke and chaos, I could see Kane emerging from behind a concrete pillar on the main floor. He moved with the fluid precision I remembered from countless training exercises, but now his rifle was pointed at my teammates instead of enemy targets. "Marcus, it doesn't have to end this way. You can still walk away from this." He stopped moving, tilting his head slightly in that gesture I'd seen him make 1,000 times when he was processing tactical information. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker across his face, uncertainty, maybe even regret. "You were always too trusting, Raven." He used my call sign with a familiarity that felt like a knife between my ribs. "Did you really think this was about money? Then what was it about?" Before he could answer, Vanessa's voice pepped through the air again. "It was about justice, sister. Justice for every innocent person killed by American military interventions around the world. Justice for every family destroyed by your precious special operations." I felt Agent Kim move to my left, positioning herself for a flanking shot on Kane while keeping one eye on the observation deck. The coordination was seamless, born from years of tactical training, but I could sense the tension in her movements. We were outnumbered and surrounded by people who knew our tactics as well as we did. "You're talking about treason, not justice," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You've betrayed your own country. I've betrayed a system that turns people like you into weapons. Do you know what your last classified operation accomplished, Alexis? The one in Eastern Europe that you're so proud of? I didn't answer, but I remembered the mission. A precision strike against a terrorist cell that had been planning attacks on civilian targets. Clean, surgical, no collateral damage. You killed a father of 3 who was working undercover for European intelligence, a man who was trying to infiltrate the same terrorist cell you were targeting. Your perfect mission cost our allies one of their best assets and compromised a multi-year operation. The words hit me like physical blows. That information was classified at levels so high that only a handful of people in the entire government had access to it, which meant, who told you that? Kane answered instead of Vanessa. Someone who got tired of watching American soldiers commit war crimes in the name of national security. Someone who decided that the world deserved to know what really happens during your classified operations. Captain Mendez's voice came through my earpiece again, urgent now. Raven, we've got vehicles approaching on the access road, multiple contacts, heavily armed. This is about to get messy. Through the terminal's windows, I could see headlights cutting through the darkness. Not the extraction aircraft we'd been expecting, but ground vehicles moving with tactical precision toward our position. The trap was closing, and we were the ones caught inside it. How long have you been planning this? I asked Vanessa, buying time while our teams repositioned. Since the day you joined Delta Force, she replied without hesitation. Do you remember calling me after your first classified mission? You were so excited, so proud of serving your country. You had no idea that you'd just participated in an operation that violated international law?
Kane volunteered, Vanessa said. Turns out there are more soldiers willing to expose American war crimes than you might think. He approached us after his previous team leader was killed. Not by enemy action, as his service record states, but by friendly fire during an operation that was covered up to protect political interests. Kane's expression hardened. Captain Torres died because command sent us into a situation with bad intelligence and no backup plan. When he tried to report the operational failures that got his men killed, he was transferred to a unit that was scheduled for high-risk deployment. 3 weeks later, he was dead. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. This wasn't just about foreign intelligence gathering. This was about exposing what they saw as systematic corruption and cover-ups within the American military establishment. So you decided to work with Russian intelligence? I asked. We decided to work with anyone willing to hold America accountable for its actions, Vanessa replied. The Russians provided resources and security, but the information we've gathered will be released to multiple international organizations, WikiLeaks, Amnesty International, the International Criminal Court. Agent Kim's voice was tight with urgency. Major, we need to move. Those vehicles are deploying personnel around the building perimeter. But I wasn't ready to withdraw, not yet. Because beneath Vanessa's political rhetoric and Kane's grievances, I could sense something else. Something that felt more personal than ideological. This was never about justice, I said, looking directly at my sister. This was about you hating that I succeeded in a world where you felt excluded. For the first time since we'd entered the building, Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? You could never handle that I found a place where I belonged, where my service meant something, so you decided to tear it all down. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of automatic weapons fire outside the building. Our perimeter teams were making contact with the approaching hostiles. Kane raised his rifle slightly, his finger moving toward the trigger. Enough talking, Raven. Time to choose sides. Agent Kim's shot took him center mass before he could complete the motion. Kane's body hit the concrete floor with a sound that echoed through the terminal like a gunshot. Agent Kim's precision shooting had been flawless. Center mass, clean kill, no chance for return fire. But as I watched my former teammate's blood pool beneath his tactical vest, what struck me wasn't grief or satisfaction. It was the laptop computer that tumbled from his hands as he fell. Ghost, we need that computer secured immediately, I called to Captain Mendoza, while keeping my rifle trained on the observation deck where Vanessa still stood, watching. But as Captain Mendoza moved toward Kane's position, my sister's voice cut through the chaos with chilling calm. I wouldn't touch that if I were you, Captain. Marcus was always quite thorough with his security protocols. The laptop's screen was flickering with lines of rapidly scrolling code, not random characters, but purposeful programming executing in real time. Even from my position 20 feet away, I could see enough to recognize what it was. A dead man's switch, designed to activate if Kane's biometric sensors stopped registering vital signs. "It's uploading," Agent Kim said, her voice tight with urgency. "Whatever intelligence they've gathered, it's being transmitted right now." Through my earpiece, I could hear our communication specialist trying to jam the signal. Negative on the electronic countermeasures, they're using a hardened satellite uplink with military-grade encryption. Estimated upload completion in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, every classified operation I'd participated in, every tactical innovation developed by Delta Force, every operational secret that Kane had accessed over 2 years of service would be in the hands of foreign intelligence services and international organizations. The sound of automatic weapons fire outside the building was intensifying. Through the terminal windows, I could see muzzle flashes as our perimeter teams engaged with the hostile reinforcements. But my attention was drawn to movement in the maintenance areas beneath the building. Thermal imaging had detected 15 hostiles, but what we were seeing now suggested something far worse. "Major," came the voice of our drone operator through the communications link. "We're tracking multiple individuals emerging from concealed positions around the airport perimeter. Initial count shows at least 30 additional contacts." 30 additional contacts? This wasn't just an extraction operation or even a sophisticated intelligence handoff. This was a full-scale military operation designed to protect what appeared to be the largest intelligence breach in American special operations history. Vanessa's voice drifted down from the observation deck, now carrying a tone of triumph that made my skin crawl. "Did you really think this was just about Marcus and me, Alexis? Did you think 2 people could compromise Delta Force operations single-handedly?" Captain Mendoza was coordinating the tactical withdrawal of our teams while trying to establish defensive positions within the terminal. But the building's open layout and glass construction made it impossible to create sustainable defensive positions against the force that was now surrounding us. "How many?" I called up to my sister, genuinely curious despite the tactical situation we were facing. "How many what? How many soldiers have realized that they're being used as tools of an imperial war machine? How many intelligence analysts have gotten tired of covering up war crimes? How many support personnel have decided that the American people deserve to know what's being done in their name?" The implications were staggering. This wasn't a small cell of disaffected soldiers. This was a network that had been operating within the American military and intelligence establishment for years, gathering information and building toward this moment. Agent Kim was studying her tactical display, tracking the movement of hostile forces around our position. "Major, we're looking at a coordinated network that extends far beyond your sister and Kane. The operational sophistication of this extraction suggests training and resources that could only come from inside our own system."
Through the smoke and chaos, I could see figures moving through the terminal's lower level, not the rushed movements of people trying to escape, but the deliberate positioning of individuals who were establishing defensive sectors and fields of fire. These weren't Russian extraction specialists or foreign operatives. These were Americans who moved with the tactical precision that came from years of military training. "Ghost," I said to Captain Mendoza, "we need to assume that our operational security has been compromised from the beginning. If this network extends as far as it appears to, they've been tracking our response to this situation since we left Quantico." His expression was grim as he processed the implications. If our operational planning had been compromised, then every tactical decision we'd made, every position we'd taken, every resource we'd deployed, had been anticipated by an enemy that understood our procedures as well as we did. The laptop screen was still flickering with uploading data, but now I could see additional screens around the terminal displaying similar activity. This wasn't just Kane's computer uploading intelligence. There were multiple transmission points throughout the building, suggesting that the entire facility had been converted into a massive intelligence broadcasting station. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked Vanessa, still hoping to gather tactical intelligence that might help us survive the next few minutes. Since 2018, she replied without hesitation. The network started small, just a few intelligence analysts who were tired of seeing their reports altered to support political narratives. But it grew as more people realized that American military actions around the world weren't matching the public statements about our objectives. 2018. That was the year I'd been promoted to captain and assigned to some of Delta Force's most sensitive operations, which meant that this network had been monitoring and documenting my career from almost the beginning. Agent Kim's secure radio crackled with an incoming transmission from our command post. All units, be advised that Signals Intelligence has detected transmission activities from at least 12 locations across the continental United States. This appears to be a coordinated intelligence release affecting multiple government agencies. 12 locations. This wasn't just about the intelligence that Kane and my sister had gathered. This was a simultaneous data dump from a network that had been embedded throughout the American national security establishment. The sound of rotor blades cutting through the night air drew my attention to the windows facing the runway, but instead of the Russian helicopter we'd been expecting, I could see the distinctive silhouette of an American military transport aircraft approaching the airport. "That's not Russian," Captain Mendoza observed, studying the aircraft through his binoculars. Vanessa's laughter carried down from the observation deck again. "Did you think we were defecting to Russia? We're not running away. We're staying right here to watch as the American people learn the truth about what their military has been doing around the world." The transport aircraft was settling onto the runway now, its loading doors already opening before it had come to a complete stop. But instead of foreign operatives disembarking, I could see American military personnel in standard-issue uniforms moving down the loading ramp. "Jesus Christ," Agent Kim whispered, understanding the implications before I did. "They're not extracting intelligence assets. They're extracting the network members who are still embedded in active military units." The true scope of the operation was becoming clear. This wasn't about a few disaffected soldiers selling secrets to foreign powers. This was about a coordinated network of American military and intelligence personnel who had decided to expose what they saw as systematic corruption and criminal activity within their own government. And they weren't running away to hide in foreign countries. They were planning to remain in the United States to face whatever consequences came from their actions, confident that the intelligence they were releasing would vindicate their decision to betray their oaths of service. The laptop screen showed the upload completion bar reaching 90%. In less than a minute, decades of classified American Special Operations intelligence would be available to news organizations, international courts, and hostile foreign governments around the world. And there was nothing we could do to stop it. 3 months after what the classified reports would call the Oakwood incident, I sat in my new office at the Pentagon, staring at a stack of personnel files that represented the future of American Special Operations. The morning sun filtered through bulletproof glass that had been installed after intelligence assessments determined that the leaked operational data had made the building a higher priority target for foreign adversaries. My new assignment was deceptively simple in its title, Director of Special Operations Security Review. In reality, I was tasked with rebuilding Delta Source from the ground up after the most devastating intelligence breach in military history. The final casualty count from Oakwood had been surprisingly low, 3 dead, including Kane, and 12 wounded. But the intelligence damage was catastrophic. Every operation I'd ever participated in had been compromised. Tactical procedures developed over decades were now public knowledge. Safe houses, operational protocols, even the identities of foreign assets who had risked their lives helping American forces, all of it had been released simultaneously to news organizations around the world. Agent Morrison knocked on my open door and entered without waiting for permission, a habit she'd developed during our months of working together to assess the damage. She carried a cup of coffee that probably gone cold hours ago and a thick folder marked with classification stamps that indicated it contained information most government officials would never see. "Final damage assessment," she said, dropping the folder on my desk. "It's worse than we thought."
I opened the folder, though I already knew most of what it contained. 47 active operations had been terminated immediately after the leak. 16 American intelligence assets had been extracted from hostile countries after their identities were compromised. 3 foreign governments had severed intelligence-sharing agreements with the United States. And most painfully, 2 allied intelligence officers had been executed by terrorist organizations that learned of their cooperation with American forces. "The international fallout is still developing," Agent Morrison continued. "The International Criminal Court has opened formal investigations into 12 operations that were detailed in the leaked documents. Congressional hearings are scheduled to begin next month, and the Russians are claiming that everything they've done in Eastern Europe over the past 5 years was justified retaliation for American activities that were previously unknown to the public." I set the folder aside and looked out the window toward the Potomac River. Somewhere across the water, in a federal correctional facility in Virginia, my sister was serving a sentence that would keep her incarcerated for the rest of her natural life. She'd refused all plea bargain offers, refused to cooperate with ongoing investigations, and refused to see any family members, including me. The trial had been a media spectacle that lasted 6 months. Vanessa had used every public appearance as an opportunity to justify her actions, reading prepared statements about American war crimes and imperial overreach. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. But what haunted me wasn't her conviction or her sentence. It was the testimony of the other network members who had been captured in coordinated raids across the country. 19 active military personnel, 12 intelligence analysts, and 6 civilian contractors, all of them American citizens who had concluded that their own government represented a greater threat to global stability than any foreign adversary. Some of them I had worked with personally. Others had processed my mission reports, maintained my security clearances, or provided logistical support for operations I'd led. They had been watching, documenting, and reporting on American special operations for years, building toward the moment when they would release everything they'd gathered. Agent Morrison sat down across from my desk, her expression more serious than usual. "There's something else, something that wasn't included in the official damage assessment." She produced a smaller folder, this one without any classification markings. "Personal correspondence that was found in your sister's apartment after her arrest. Letters she wrote, but never sent. I thought you should see them." I hesitated before opening the folder. The past 3 months had been consumed with operational analysis, personnel investigations, and the systematic reconstruction of compromised intelligence networks. I deliberately avoided thinking about Vanessa as my sister rather than as a security threat. But the letter on top of the stack was dated 2 years ago, written in the familiar handwriting that had once filled birthday cards and family Christmas letters. "Alexis, I know you'll never read this, but I need to write it anyway. I need you to understand that what I'm doing isn't about hating you or wanting to hurt you. It's about loving you enough to try to save you from becoming something you'll regret for the rest of your life." The letter continued for 3 pages, describing her growing awareness of what she called the moral cost of American military interventions, and her fear that I was becoming a tool of a system that creates more suffering than it prevents. She wrote about watching me change over the years, becoming more distant, more willing to accept classified missions without questioning their broader implications. "You used to ask questions about everything," one paragraph read. "You used to challenge authority and demand explanations for decisions that affected people's lives. But the military has trained that curiosity out of you, replaced it with obedience and operational focus. I'm trying to give you back the ability to question what you're being asked to do." I set the letter down and looked at Agent Morrison.
How many more are there? 17 letters spanning 3 years. She documented her decision-making process, her recruitment into the network, even her plans for the intelligence release. But Major, there's something else you need to understand. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, despite the fact that we were in one of the most secure offices in the Pentagon. The investigation isn't over. We've identified the network members who were actively involved in the intelligence gathering, but there's evidence suggesting a larger support structure that we haven't uncovered yet. People who provided funding, resources, and operational security for the network without directly participating in intelligence activities. The implications were staggering. If the network was larger than we'd identified, if there were still undetected members embedded in the American military and intelligence establishment, then everything we'd rebuilt over the past 3 months might be compromised from the beginning. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "We need you to do what you've been doing. Rebuild Delta Force with personnel whose loyalty is beyond question, develop new operational procedures that can't be compromised by the intelligence that was released, and most importantly, help us identify the psychological and organizational factors that allowed this network to operate undetected for so long." I stood up and walked to the window again, looking out at the city where the most powerful military in human history was headquartered. Somewhere in the buildings and offices stretching out below me, there might be other American citizens who had concluded that their own government was the enemy. "Agent Morrison," I said without turning around, "do you think my sister was right about any of it?" The question hung in the air for a long moment before she answered.
I think she was right that our government has made mistakes, serious mistakes that have caused suffering and violated the principles we claim to defend. But I also think that betraying your oath of service and compromising operations that protect American lives isn't the way to address those mistakes. I turned back to face her. And if the system is too broken to fix from the inside, then you fix it anyway, she said, because the alternative is chaos. And chaos always hurts innocent people more than it hurts the powerful. I picked up the personnel files from my desk, the records of the soldiers, analysts, and operatives who would form the new foundation of American special operations. Each file represented someone who had been vetted, investigated, and deemed trustworthy enough to carry forward the mission of protecting American interests around the world. But as I looked at their faces and read their service records, I couldn't help wondering how many of them might someday conclude that their government had asked them to do things that violated their conscience. The work of rebuilding would be long and difficult. Trust, once broken on this scale, couldn't be restored with new procedures and security protocols. It required a fundamental re-examination of what we asked our military personnel to do and how we justified those actions to ourselves and to the world. My sister had been wrong about many things, but she had been right about one. The questions needed to be asked, and this time I was going to make sure they got answered.